The wagon wheels groaned against the muddy riverbank as dawn broke over the swollen waters of the Bear River, and Diana Emmett knew with a sinking certainty that crossing alone would likely be the last decision she ever made. She had been traveling for 3 weeks now, leaving behind the ashes of her family's burned farmhouse in Missouri and heading west toward the promise of her aunt's homestead in Oregon Territory. It was May of 1867, and the countryside still bore the scars of a war that had ended just 2 years prior. Deanna had turned 21 the month before her parents succumbed to fever, one after the other, leaving her with nothing but a wagon, 2 exhausted horses, and a leather-bound journal filled with her mother's careful directions to a sister she had not seen in 15 years. The river had not looked this threatening when she had camped the previous evening. Spring runoff from the mountains had turned what should have been a manageable ford into a churning expanse of brown water carrying broken branches and debris. Deanna stood at the edge, her hand shading her eyes against the rising sun, trying to gauge the depth and speed of the current. Her horses stamped nervously, sensing her uncertainty. "That is a fool's crossing if I ever saw one." Deanna spun around, her heart hammering. A man sat astride a paint horse about 20 yards back, and she wondered how long he had been watching her. He was tall in the saddle, wearing a weathered brown hat pulled low, a dusty coat that had seen better days, and he had the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from the same rock as the distant mountains. Sharp jaw, serious eyes the color of storm clouds, and a few days' worth of stubble darkening his chin. "I did not hear you approach," Deanna said, trying to keep her voice steady. She had learned in her weeks of travel that showing fear was dangerous, even when her pulse was racing. "That is generally the idea when you are trying not to startle someone," he said, guiding his horse closer. "Name is Lucas Kincaid. I have been trailing about a half-mile behind you since yesterday afternoon." Diana's hand moved instinctively toward the rifle propped against the wagon seat. "You have been following me." Lucas held up one hand, palm out. "Not in the way you are thinking. I was heading north from Kelton when I saw your wagon. Woman traveling alone is not common, and it is not exactly safe. Figured I would keep an eye out, make sure you did not run into trouble." "I can take care of myself," Deanna said, though the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. She had barely escaped 2 different groups of drifters in the past week, and only the rifle and a well-timed rainstorm had saved her from a third encounter. Lucas dismounted, moving with the easy grace of someone who had spent more of his life on horseback than on foot. He was older than Diana had first thought, probably around 26 or 27, with sun-weathered skin and calluses on his hands that spoke of hard work. He walked to the river's edge and studied it for a long moment. "Current is running about 6 miles per hour, maybe more in the center channel," he said. "Water is high enough to float your wagon, which means you would lose control about 10 seconds after the wheels left the bottom. Your horses are tired. I can see it from here. They would not have the strength to fight that current, and you would all 3 end up a mile downstream if you were lucky enough to make it to shore at all." Deanna felt her throat tighten. She had known it was dangerous, but hearing someone else confirm it made the reality settle heavy in her chest. "I have to cross. I have no choice. I am running low on supplies, and the next town is on the other side." "Kelton is actually south and west of here," Lucas said. "You pass the turnoff about 6 miles back, and there is another crossing 15 miles upriver where the water spreads out and runs shallower. We could make it there by tomorrow afternoon." Deanna crossed her arms. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Kincaid, but I am quite capable of making my own decisions." Lucas turned to look at her fully for the first time, and something in his expression made Diana's breath catch. It was not pity exactly, but a kind of understanding that suggested he knew what it was to be alone and stubborn about it. "I am sure you are," he said quietly. "But capable does not mean you have to do everything alone. That river will kill you. That is not an opinion. That is a fact. And I would be a sorry excuse for a human being if I let you try it just to preserve your pride." They stood there in the morning light, the sound of rushing water filling the silence between them. Deanna studied him, trying to assess his intentions. She had learned to read men in the weeks since her parents died, to watch for the telltale signs of danger. The way they looked at her, the way they moved, the tone of their voice. But Lucas Kincaid was not looking at her like she was prey. He was looking at her like she was a problem he intended to solve, whether she liked it or not. "Why do you care?" she asked finally. "You do not know me. I could be anyone." "My sister was about your age when she headed west with her husband," Lucas said. "They made it as far as Wyoming before he got himself killed in a card game. She tried to make it back to Missouri on her own. She did not make it past the first river crossing." He paused, his jaw working. "So yeah, I care. Call it penance if you want. Call it whatever you like. But I am not letting you cross this river alone." Deanna felt something shift in her chest, a small crack in the armor she had been building around herself. "I am sorry about your sister." Lucas nodded once, then turned back to the wagon. "We should get moving if we want to reach the upper crossing by tomorrow. There is decent camping about 10 miles north. We can make it there before dark." "I cannot pay you," Deanna said. "I have almost nothing left. Did I ask for payment?" Lucas was already checking the harness on her horses, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. "These animals need rest and better feed. When did you last stop for more than a few hours?" 3 days ago, Deanna admitted. "I have been trying to make up time. I got lost near the salt flats and added almost a week to my journey." Lucas shook his head but did not comment. Instead, he pulled a small bag from his saddlebag and offered it to Deanna. "Dried apples. You look like you have not eaten properly in days either." Deanna wanted to refuse, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. She took the bag with as much dignity as she could muster. "Thank you. We will move slow," Lucas said, swinging back into his saddle. "Your horses cannot take much more hard travel. There is a ranch about 5 miles north where I know the family. We can stop and see if they have grain to spare." As they set off, Deanna found herself stealing glances at the man riding beside her wagon. Lucas Kincaid was not what she had expected to encounter in the Utah Territory. Most of the men she had met since leaving Missouri had been rough, crude, interested only in what they could take from her. But Lucas seemed different. He rode with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly who he was and did not feel the need to prove anything to anyone. "You said you were in Kelton," Deanna said after they had been traveling for about an hour. "What were you doing there?" "Delivering horses," Lucas said. "I have a ranch about 30 miles south of here. Nothing fancy, just enough land to run a small herd. I break and train horses, sell them to the army mostly, sometimes to ranchers who need good working animals." "You live there alone." "Me and about 200 head of horses," Lucas said with a hint of amusement. "And a dog named Rufus who thinks he is a horse. It suits me." "Do you not get lonely?" Lucas considered the question. "Sometimes, but I have found that being alone is better than being with the wrong people. After the war, a lot of men came back different, angry, lost. I needed time to figure out who I was without all that death hanging over me." "You fought in the war," Deanna said. "It was not a question." 4 years with the Union cavalry, Lucas confirmed. "Saw things I would rather forget. Did things I am not proud of. When it was over, I just wanted to find a piece of land where I could work with my hands and not have to shoot at anyone." Deanna was quiet for a moment, thinking about her own losses. My father fought too. He came back changed, quieter. He used to smile all the time before the war. After, it was like he had forgotten how. A lot of us did, Lucas said softly. They reached the ranch Lucas had mentioned just after midday. It was a modest spread with a log house, a barn, and several corrals. A woman came out to greet them, wiping her hands on her apron. She was middle-aged with kind eyes and gray streaked hair pulled back in a simple bun. "Lucas Kincaid," she said warmly. "We have not seen you in months. John will be sorry he missed you. He is out checking the fence line." "Mrs. Patterson," Lucas said, tipping his hat. "This is Miss Deanna Emmett. She is heading to Oregon Territory, and her horses need rest and feed. I was hoping you might have some grain to spare. I can pay." Mrs. Patterson waved away the suggestion of payment and turned her attention to Deanna. "You poor dear, you look exhausted. Come inside and have some proper food. Lucas, you get those horses taken care of. They look like they are about to drop." Before Deanna could protest, she found herself being shepherded into the house and seated at a large wooden table. Mrs. Patterson moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, setting out fresh bread, butter, cold chicken, and a bowl of early strawberries that made Diana's mouth water. "Eat," Mrs. Patterson commanded gently. "You are skin and bones, child. When did you last have a decent meal?" Deanna could not remember. She ate slowly at first, trying to maintain some semblance of manners, but hunger soon won out. Mrs. Patterson watched with satisfaction, occasionally refilling Diana's plate or cup. "Traveling alone?" Mrs. Patterson asked, settling into a chair across from Deanna. "My parents died," Deanna said quietly. "I am going to live with my aunt in Oregon. She has a homestead there." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened. "I am sorry for your loss, but you are lucky Lucas found you. He is a good man, that one. Keeps to himself mostly, but when someone needs help, he is always there." "He said he has a ranch," Deanna said, grateful for the change of subject. "Best horse trainer in the territory," Mrs. Patterson said with pride. "Horses that other men would shoot as unbreakable, Lucas can gentle them in a matter of weeks. He has a gift." She paused, studying Deanna with shrewd eyes. "He does not usually take to people so quickly, though, keeps his distance. You must have made an impression." Deanna felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He is just being kind." "Maybe," Mrs. Patterson said. "Or maybe he sees something in you worth protecting." Lucas came in a few minutes later, having settled Diana's horses in the barn with fresh hay and grain. He accepted a plate of food from Mrs. Patterson and sat down at the table, looking more relaxed than he had earlier. "I told them we would stay the night if that is all right with you," he said to Deanna. "Your horses need the rest, and Mrs. Patterson's hospitality is not something you turn down lightly." "Of course you will stay," Mrs. Patterson said. "Deanna can take the spare room, and Lucas, you know you are always welcome to the bunkhouse." That evening, after a supper that was even more elaborate than lunch, Diana found herself sitting on the porch with Lucas while Mrs. Patterson cleaned up inside despite Deanna's offers to help. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that took Diana's breath away. "It is beautiful here," she said softly. "It grows on you," Lucas agreed. He was leaning against the porch railing, his hat pushed back on his head. "When I first came to Utah, I thought it was the most desolate place I had ever seen. But the longer you stay, the more you notice. The way the light changes, the smell of sage after rain, the quiet. Do you miss Missouri?" Deanna asked. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. "I miss what it used to be, before the war, but that place does not exist anymore, too many ghosts." "I know what you mean," Deanna said. "Everything back home reminded me of my parents. I could not stay there. It felt like drowning." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge overhead. Deanna felt something unfamiliar settling over her, and it took her a moment to recognize it as peace. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe. "Lucas," she said hesitantly, "thank you for stopping me at the river. For helping me." He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the gathering darkness. "You do not need to thank me, Deanna. It is what anyone should do." "But most people would not," Deanna said. "Most people would have ridden past without a second thought." "Then I am glad I am not most people," Lucas said simply. The next morning, they set out early with full saddlebags courtesy of Mrs. Patterson, who had insisted on packing them enough food for a week. The horses looked considerably better after a night of rest and good feed, and Deanna herself felt stronger than she had in days. They traveled north through rolling hills covered in spring grass and wildflowers. Lucas pointed out landmarks along the way, telling stories about the land and the people who lived there. He had a way of talking that made even ordinary things seem interesting, and Diana found herself hanging on his words. "That peak there is called Terrace Mountain," he said, gesturing to a distinctive formation in the distance. "The Shoshone have stories about it. They say it is where the spirits go to watch over the living." "You believe that?" Deanna asked. Lucas shrugged. "I believe there are things in this world we cannot explain. I have seen enough strangeness to keep an open mind." They reached the upper crossing by mid-afternoon the following day, just as Lucas had predicted. The river here was wider but shallower, spreading across a broad gravel bed that allowed the current to dissipate. Lucas rode across first, testing the depth and the footing, then came back to guide Diana's wagon. "Keep the horses moving steady," he instructed. "Do not let them stop in the middle. I will be right beside you." The crossing was still nerve-wracking, with water rising nearly to the wagon bed at the deepest point, but Lucas stayed true to his word. He rode alongside the entire way, one hand ready to grab the harness if the horses faltered. When they reached the far bank, Deanna let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "See," Lucas said with a small smile. "Not so bad when you have help." They made camp that evening in a grove of cottonwood trees near a spring. Lucas proved to be efficient at camp work, setting up a fire ring and unpacking gear with practiced movements. Deanna found herself watching him, noticing little things. The way he moved, the quiet competence in everything he did. The rare smiles that transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. "You are staring," Lucas said without looking up from the fire he was building. Deanna felt her face flame. "I was just thinking." "About what?" "About how strange it is that a week ago I did not know you existed, and now I cannot imagine having made it this far without you." Lucas looked up at that, meeting her eyes across the growing firelight. "Life is strange that way sometimes. You go along thinking you have everything figured out, and then something happens that changes everything." "Is that what this is?" Deanna asked quietly. "Something that changes everything?" Lucas held her gaze for a long moment. "I think it might be." They talked late into the night, sharing stories of their lives. Deanna learned that Lucas had grown up on a small farm in Ohio, the youngest of 4 children. His father had been a blacksmith, his mother a schoolteacher. He had learned to ride almost before he could walk, spending every spare moment with horses. The war had taken his 2 older brothers. His sister had died in the river crossing he had mentioned. His parents had both passed within a year of each other, leaving Lucas as the sole survivor of his family. "I think that is why I came west," he admitted. "There was nothing left for me back there. Every place I went, every person I saw reminded me of what I had lost. I needed to start over somewhere new." Deanna understood completely. "That is exactly how I felt. Like I was suffocating under the weight of all that grief. And now, Lucas asked. Now I feel like I can breathe again, Deanna said softly. Is that terrible? To feel relief when everything has been so awful? No, Lucas said. It is human. We are meant to keep living, Deanna. The people we lost would want that for us. Over the following days, they fell into an easy rhythm of travel. Lucas proved to be excellent company, never talking too much or too little, always seeming to know when Deanna needed conversation and when she needed quiet. He was also remarkably thoughtful, making sure she had the best spot by the fire at night, insisting she take the softer bedroll when hers developed a tear, sharing his own supplies without hesitation. They passed through the small town of Snowville, where Lucas traded for fresh supplies, and Deanna was able to purchase fabric for a new dress, her current one having been patched so many times it was more patches than original material. The shopkeeper's wife, a friendly woman named Mrs. Chen, insisted on helping Deanna pick out the fabric. Your husband has good taste, Mrs. Chen said, gesturing to Lucas, who was examining bridles in the next aisle. Not many men would be patient enough to wait while their wives shop. He is not my husband, Deanna said quickly, then felt foolish at how disappointed she sounded. Mrs. Chen raised an eyebrow but said nothing, just smiled knowingly and helped Deanna select a lovely blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes. When they left town, Lucas was unusually quiet. Deanna finally asked if something was wrong. People are assuming we are married, he said, keeping his eyes on the trail ahead. Does that bother you? Deanna asked, her heart beating faster. No, Lucas said after a pause. That is what bothers me. It should bother me. We have only known each other a week, but when Mrs. Chen called me your husband, I did not want to correct her. Deanna did not know what to say to that. Her own feelings had been growing more complicated by the day. She found herself looking forward to their evening conversations, to the sound of Lucas's voice, to the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention. She had never felt this way about anyone before, and it was both thrilling and terrifying. Lucas, she said carefully. What happens when we reach Oregon, when I get to my aunt's homestead? He was quiet for so long that Deanna thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, I have been thinking about that. And I do not want to say goodbye to you, Deanna. I know it is too soon. I know we barely know each other, but I have never felt this way about anyone, and I do not want to just walk away and pretend this did not happen. Deanna felt her throat tighten with emotion. I do not want that either. They made camp early that evening in a meadow full of lupine and Indian paintbrush. After they had eaten, Lucas came and sat beside Diana on the log she had claimed, closer than he usually did. Can I tell you something? He asked. Of course. The first time I saw you, standing by that river, I thought you were the bravest person I had ever seen. Scared out of your mind but ready to try that crossing anyway because you did not see any other choice. That took courage. It was more like desperation, Deanna said with a shaky laugh. There is not much difference sometimes, Lucas said. But later, watching you these past days, I realized it was not just courage. You have this strength in you, Deanna. This determination to keep going no matter what. You lost everything, but you did not let it break you. That is rare. I feel broken sometimes, Deanna admitted. We are all a little broken, Lucas said softly. He reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. Maybe that is why this works. We understand each other's cracks. Deanna turned to look at him, really look at him in the fading light. His face was serious, his gray eyes searching hers. Without thinking about it, without planning it, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft and tentative, barely more than a brush of lips, but it felt like something fundamental had shifted in the world. Lucas made a small sound of surprise, then his hand came up to cup her face, and he kissed her back with a tenderness that made Deanna's heart ache. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Diana Emmett," he said, his voice rough, "you are going to ruin me." "Is that a bad thing?" "No," he said, and kissed her again. "It is the best thing that has ever happened to me." They sat there as the stars came out, holding each other, not needing words. Deanna felt something settling into place inside her, like she had been searching for this without knowing it. Not just Lucas, but this feeling, this sense of belonging, of being seen and understood. "Come with me," Lucas said suddenly. "What? Do not go to Oregon. Come back to Utah with me, to the ranch. We can build a life there together." Deanna pulled back to look at him. "Lucas, we have only known each other a week." "I know," he said. "I know it is crazy. But Diana, I have been alone for 3 years. I have met a lot of people in that time, and none of them made me feel the way you do. Like I could be myself. Like I did not have to pretend the war did not change me. You understand, because you have your own losses, your own scars." "My aunt is expecting me," Deanna said, but even as she said it, she knew it was a weak argument. Her aunt had never written back after Deanna sent word about her parents dying. For all Deanna knew, the woman did not even want her there. "Write to your aunt," Lucas said. "Tell her you are safe and you have found somewhere else to be. If she cares about you, she will understand. If she does not, then you are better off not going there anyway." Diana knew he was right. She had been clinging to the idea of Oregon because it was the only plan she had, but it had never felt real. The ranch, though, with Lucas, that felt real. "What if it does not work?" she asked, voicing her deepest fear. "What if we get to know each other better and realize this was just a product of circumstance? Two lonely people finding each other on the trail. Then we will deal with that when it comes," Lucas said. "But Deanna, I do not think that is going to happen. I have never been more sure of anything in my life." Deanna thought about everything that had brought her to this moment, the fever that took her parents, the burned farmhouse, the weeks of lonely travel, the swollen river where she had stood contemplating a crossing that would have killed her. And Lucas, appearing like something out of a dream, refusing to let her face it alone. "You are not crossing alone," she said softly, remembering his words from that first morning. "I am coming with you always." Lucas's face transformed with joy. He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her again, deeper this time, full of promise. "We should still go to Snowville and get married properly," he said when they came up for air. "I know we are getting ahead of ourselves, but I want to do this right." Married. Deanna felt dizzy with happiness and terror in equal measure. "Unless you do not want to," Lucas said quickly. "We can wait. Court properly. I am sorry I am rushing you." "No," Deanna said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "No, I want to marry you. I want all of it, the ranch, the life, everything." They turned back south the next morning, retracing their steps toward Snowville. The journey that had felt long and difficult before now passed in what felt like moments. They talked constantly, making plans, learning more about each other, stealing kisses whenever they stopped. In Snowville, they found a circuit preacher who agreed to marry them. Mrs. Chen insisted on hosting a small celebration at her home, inviting half the town. It was nothing like the grand wedding Deanna had once imagined as a girl, but standing in Mrs. Chen's parlor with Lucas's hand in hers, promising to love and honor him for the rest of her life. Deanna knew she had never been happier. They spent their wedding night in the town's small hotel, and Deanna discovered that the tender passion Lucas had shown in his kisses extended to everything else. He was patient and gentle, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Afterward, lying in his arms, Deanna finally understood what her mother had meant when she said marriage was about finding your other half. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Lucas said, pulling her closer. "I promise I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this decision." The journey to Lucas's ranch took 4 more days. As they traveled south through increasingly arid country, Lucas told her more about the property and his work with the horses. His passion for it was evident in every word, and Diana found herself getting excited about this new life she was stepping into. When they finally crested a rise and Lucas pointed out the ranch below, Diana caught her breath. It was beautiful in a stark, wild way. The house was modest, built of logs with a stone chimney, but it sat in a sheltered valley with a year-round creek running through it. The corrals were well built and spacious, and she could see horses grazing in the surrounding pastures. A large dog came bounding up to meet them, barking joyfully. Lucas dismounted and knelt to greet the animal, who wiggled with excitement. "This must be Rufus," Diana said, climbing down from the wagon. "In the flesh," Lucas confirmed. "Rufus, meet your new mistress. You be good to her." Rufus promptly transferred his affection to Diana, leaning against her legs and looking up at her with adoring eyes. Diana laughed and scratched his ears, feeling some of her nervousness ease. If the dog approved of her, that was a good start. The house was simple but clean, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, a bedroom, and a small loft. There was a rocking chair by the fireplace, a sturdy table and chairs, and shelves lined with books that surprised Diana. "You read," she said, running her fingers along the spines. "One of the few luxuries I allow myself," Lucas said. He was watching her nervously, clearly worried about her reaction to the house. "I know it is not much. We can add on as we need to, build a proper kitchen, more bedrooms eventually." Diana turned to him and took his hands. "It is perfect. It is ours. That makes it perfect." The first weeks of their marriage were a period of adjustment. Diana had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, which was vastly different from farming. Lucas was patient, teaching her about the horses, showing her which ones were gentle enough for her to handle and which ones needed more time and training. She discovered she had a natural way with them, able to approach even the skittish ones without frightening them. "You are a natural," Lucas said one afternoon, watching her work with a young mare that had been wild caught and was still adjusting to human contact. "That one tried to kick me yesterday, and here she is eating out of your hand." "She just needed someone to be patient with her," Diana said. "To show her that not all touch means pain." Lucas came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "That is what you did for me too." Diana learned to keep house in the rough conditions of ranch life, to make meals from simple ingredients, to preserve food for winter, to mend clothes and blankets that took a beating from the harsh country. It was hard work, but it was satisfying in a way her old life never had been. In return, she brought softness to Lucas's life. She planted a garden near the house, coaxing vegetables and flowers from the stubborn soil. She sewed curtains for the windows and a quilt for their bed. She filled the house with small touches that made it a home rather than just a place to sleep. But it was not all domestic bliss. The land was hard and unforgiving. One of their horses broke a leg in a prairie dog hole and had to be put down, which devastated them both. A summer storm destroyed part of the barn roof, requiring days of hard labor to repair. Diana suffered through the brutal heat of her first Utah summer, wondering if she would ever adjust to the intensity of it. Through it all, Lucas was her anchor. When she felt overwhelmed, he would take her hand and walk with her down to the creek, where they would sit in the shade, and he would remind her of how far they had come. When he pushed himself too hard trying to get everything done, she would make him stop and rest, forcing him to remember he was only human. Their love deepened through the daily work of building a life together. Deanna learned that Lucas talked in his sleep sometimes, reliving battles from the war. She learned to wake him gently from those nightmares, to hold him until the shaking stopped. Lucas learned that Diana needed time alone occasionally, that sometimes she would take a horse and ride out alone just to have space to breathe. He learned not to worry when she did this, to trust that she would come back. By the time autumn arrived, painting the mountains in gold and crimson, Diana felt like she had lived on the ranch her entire life. She could barely remember the frightened woman who had stood by that swollen river, ready to risk everything out of sheer desperation. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Diana told Lucas she was pregnant. He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen, and he picked her up and spun her around just like he had the night they decided to get married. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Deanna asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Lucas said. He pulled her into his lap, one hand moving to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "I thought I had lost everything, my family, my future. And then you came into my life and gave it all back to me." "We gave it to each other," Deanna corrected softly. "Winter was hard that year. Snow came early and stayed late, drifting against the house and barns in white waves. Lucas worked constantly to keep the horses fed and the buildings maintained. Diana grew larger with the baby, moving more slowly but refusing to stop helping with the daily chores. "You should rest more," Lucas would say, but Diana would just laugh and continue kneading bread or mending tack. "I am pregnant, not dying," she would reply. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time while still doing the work that needs doing." But she did appreciate Lucas's increased protectiveness. The way he made sure she did not lift anything heavy, the way he would rub her aching back in the evenings, the way he talked to her belly, telling their unborn child stories about the horses and the land. The baby came in March during a late spring snowstorm. Mrs. Patterson had come to stay with them for the last few weeks of Deanna's pregnancy, and her presence was a blessing as Deanna labored through the long night. Lucas paced outside, refusing to go far from the house even as Mrs. Patterson shooed him out of the bedroom. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he burst back into the room despite Mrs. Patterson's protests. Deanna was propped up on pillows, exhausted but glowing, holding a small bundle wrapped in one of the quilts she had made. "A son," she said softly. "We have a son." Lucas approached slowly, almost reverently. When Deanna pulled back the blanket to show him the tiny red face, Lucas felt tears stream down his cheeks. "He is perfect," Lucas whispered. "You are perfect." They named him Samuel, after Lucas's oldest brother who had died at Gettysburg. Samuel Kincaid had his father's gray eyes and his mother's determination, making his presence known from the very first day with lusty cries and a strong grip. Life on the ranch shifted to accommodate the new addition. Deanna learned to work with Samuel strapped to her back in a sling Lucas fashioned from soft leather. The baby seemed to enjoy being outside, watching the horses and the sky with wide, curious eyes. Lucas was a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son. He would hold Samuel for hours, telling him stories, singing old songs his mother had taught him, showing him the ranch that would one day be his. "I never thought I would have this," he told Deanna one evening as they watched Samuel sleep in the cradle Lucas had built with his own hands. "A family. A home. After the war, I thought this kind of happiness was not meant for people like me, people who had seen and done the things I had." "You deserve this," Deanna said firmly. "You deserve every bit of happiness you can find. "So do you," Lucas said, pulling her close. "Thank God I stopped your wagon that day. Thank God you let me come with you." "I am coming with you always," Deanna quoted, smiling. "That is what you said." "And I meant it," Lucas said. "Every word." The years rolled on, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythms of ranch life. Samuel grew into a sturdy toddler, then a curious little boy who followed his father everywhere, and showed the same natural affinity for horses that both his parents possessed. 2 years after Samuel was born, Diana gave birth to twin daughters, Grace and Rose, who filled the house with laughter and chaos. Lucas built the additions he had promised, expanding the house to accommodate their growing family. He also built a larger barn and additional corrals as the horse operation grew. Word had spread about the quality of his animals, and buyers came from as far as California and Colorado to purchase horses trained by Lucas Kincaid. Deanna started a small side business of her own, discovering she had a talent for training horses specifically for women riders. She developed a reputation for patience and skill, and women from surrounding territories would send their horses to her for training, or sometimes come themselves to learn her methods. "Who would have thought," Lucas said one evening, watching Deanna work with a particularly difficult mare while simultaneously keeping an eye on the twins playing in the corral, "that the terrified woman at the river would become one of the most respected horse trainers in Utah." "I was not terrified," Deanna protested. "Deanna, you were about to attempt a river crossing that would have killed you." "Well, yes, there was that," she admitted with a laugh. "But I was determined. There is a difference." "That you were," Lucas agreed, pulling her into his arms. "And thank God for that determination. It brought you to me." When Samuel was 7, Deanna gave birth to another son whom they named Jacob. He was a surprise after the twins, but a welcome one, arriving with a shock of dark hair and a disposition as peaceful as his older brother's was energetic. The ranch prospered. Lucas hired on 2 hands to help with the work, young men from Kelton who proved hardworking and reliable. The house was expanded again, with a proper kitchen and a parlor where Deanna could entertain the occasional visitors who came calling. But despite the success and the busy household, Lucas and Deanna always made time for each other. Once a month, they would leave the children with Mrs. Patterson, who still lived nearby, and ride out to a spot by the creek where they had their first real conversation about their feelings. They would spend the day there, talking, laughing, remembering the early days of their relationship, reconnecting as husband and wife rather than just parents and business partners. "You ever regret it?" Deanna asked one afternoon during one of these excursions. She was lying with her head in Lucas's lap, watching clouds drift across the impossibly blue sky. "Stopping my wagon that day, taking on the responsibility of me." Lucas looked down at her with such love that it took her breath away even after all these years. "Not for a single second." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Deanna Kincaid. You and our children, this life we built together. It is more than I ever dreamed of having. Even though I was stubborn and difficult, especially because you were stubborn and difficult," Lucas said with a grin. "If you had been easy to convince, you would have been boring." "I am many things, but I do not think anyone has ever accused me of being boring," Deanna said. As their children grew, Diana and Lucas made sure to tell them the story of how they met. The swollen river. The stubborn woman and the determined cowboy. The decision to turn back from Oregon and build a life together in Utah. "You were brave, Mama," Samuel said one evening when he was 12, and Deanna was telling the story yet again to entertain the younger children. "I was scared," Deanna corrected. "But your father showed me that being scared does not mean you have to face things alone." "You are not crossing alone," Lucas added, his eyes meeting Diana's across the room. "I was coming with you always." It became something of a family motto, that phrase. Whenever one of the children faced something difficult or frightening, Diana or Lucas would remind them, "You are not alone. We are coming with you always." Samuel grew into a young man with his father's quiet strength and his mother's determination. He took to ranching naturally, showing an even greater talent with horses than Lucas had. By the time he was 18, he was handling much of the day-to-day operation of the ranch, allowing Lucas to slow down a bit and spend more time with the younger children. The twins, Grace and Rose, were as different as two people could be despite sharing the same face. Grace was quiet and bookish, spending hours with the volumes in Lucas's library and eventually leaving to attend a women's college in Salt Lake City. Rose was wild and adventurous, more at home on horseback than anywhere else, eventually marrying a rancher from the next valley over and starting her own horse breeding operation. Jacob, the youngest, surprised them all by showing an aptitude for medicine. After an incident where he successfully set a ranch hand's broken arm, using only what he had read in one of Grace's medical books, Lucas and Diana arranged for him to apprentice with a doctor in Kelton, with the ultimate goal of him attending medical school back east. Through it all, through the triumphs and challenges of raising 4 children and running a successful ranch, Diana and Lucas's love remained constant. If anything, it deepened with time, growing richer and more complex as they navigated the joys and sorrows of life together. They weathered droughts and harsh winters. They survived the death of old Rufus and the joy of new puppies. They celebrated as their children grew and started families of their own. They mourned when Mrs. Patterson died at the age of 73, feeling the loss of the woman who had been like a mother to both of them. On their 20th anniversary, Lucas surprised Diana with a trip back to the place where they had first met. They rode out to the Bear River, finding the spot where Diana's wagon had stood all those years ago. The river was gentle that day, running clear and calm in its banks. "Hard to believe it was so different that day," Diana said, standing at the water's edge. "Hard to believe I was actually going to try to cross it alone." "You were desperate," Lucas said, coming to stand behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "You did not see any other choice. And then you appeared," Diana said, leaning back against him. "Like an answer to a prayer I did not even know I had said." "I was just a man who could not stand by and watch someone make a terrible mistake," Lucas said. "But you, Diana, you were the brave one. You could have told me to go to hell, could have insisted on trying that crossing alone. But you trusted me. You let me help you. That took more courage than anything I did." Diana turned in his arms to face him. At 41, Lucas had gray threading through his dark hair and lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but to Diana, he was as handsome as the day she had first seen him. "I knew," she said softly. "Even then, some part of me knew that you were different. That you were going to change my life." "We changed each other's lives," Lucas corrected. He cupped her face in his hands, the same gesture he had used that first night they kissed. "I was half alive before you, just going through the motions. You reminded me how to feel, how to hope, how to love." They kissed there by the river, the same river that had brought them together, and Diana felt the same flutter in her heart that she had felt 20 years ago. Some things, she thought, never changed. Some loves were built to last forever. As they rode back to the ranch that evening, the sun setting in a blaze of gold and pink behind them, Diana reflected on the strange paths life took. If her parents had not died, she would never have left Missouri. If she had not gotten lost near the Salt Flats, she might not have encountered that particular river on that particular day. If Lucas had not been returning from Kelton at that exact time, Their paths might never have crossed. So many tiny decisions and accidents of fate that had combined to bring them together. It seemed impossible that it was all random chance. It seemed more like destiny. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "About how lucky I am," Deanna said. "How lucky we both are." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Lucas said. "It was meant to be, you and me, this life, all of it." "You really believe that with everything I am," Lucas said simply. The years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren, more changes, more moments of joy and sorrow. Lucas's hair turned completely gray, then white. Diana's hands grew arthritic from years of hard work, though she refused to stop completely, still training horses well into her 60s. Samuel took over full operation of the ranch when Lucas turned 65, though Lucas still spent hours each day in the corrals, unable to stay away from the horses he loved. Grace became a teacher in Salt Lake City, eventually becoming headmistress of her own school. Rose's horse operation became one of the most successful in the region. Jacob finished medical school and returned to Utah, setting up a practice in Kelton, and eventually becoming one of the most respected doctors in the territory. Through it all, Deanna and Lucas remained each other's constant. They grew old together, their love maturing like fine wine, becoming richer and deeper with each passing year. On their 40th anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Lucas stood and raised his glass in a toast. 40 years ago, he said, his voice still strong despite his 70 years. I saw a woman standing by a river about to make a decision that would have killed her. I could have ridden on past, could have assumed she knew what she was doing, but something made me stop. Something made me say, "You are not crossing alone. I am coming with you always." He turned to Deanna, his gray eyes still as sharp and loving as they had been that first day. "Best decision I ever made. Deanna, you have been my partner, my lover, my best friend, and the love of my life. Thank you for letting me come with you. Thank you for coming with me." There was not a dry eye in the room as Deanna stood and took his hand. "Thank you for stopping my wagon," she said softly. "Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. Thank you for loving me when I did not think I was worthy of love. You saved my life that day, Lucas Kincaid. And every day since, you have given me reasons to be grateful for that salvation." They kissed to the applause and cheers of their family, and Deanna thought about that scared young woman standing by the river all those years ago. If she could speak to that woman now, what would she say? That everything would work out, that all the pain and loss would lead to something beautiful. That the stern-faced cowboy on the paint horse would become the great love of her life. Maybe she would just tell her to trust, to have faith, to believe that sometimes when you reach the end of your strength, help arrives in the most unexpected forms. Lucas lived to be 78, still sharp and engaged right up until the end. He died peacefully in his sleep on a warm summer night, with Deanna beside him holding his hand. His last words to her were the same ones he had said countless times over their 48 years together. "I love you. I will always love you." Deanna mourned him deeply, but she did not let grief consume her the way it had when she was young. She had learned too much about resilience, about the importance of continuing on. She continued to live at the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, still training horses when her arthritis allowed, still telling stories about the old days. She lived to be 83, remaining sharp and active until nearly the end. On her last day, surrounded by 4 generations of the family she and Lucas had created, she held Samuel's hand and smiled. "Tell them the story," she said softly. "Tell them about the river, about your father stopping my wagon, about how love can find you in the most unexpected moments if you are brave enough to accept it. "I will, Mama," Samuel promised, tears streaming down his weathered face. "We all will." Deanna closed her eyes, and in her mind, she was 21 again, standing by that swollen river with the sun rising over the mountains. She heard the sound of hoofbeats, turned to see a stern-faced cowboy on a paint horse. "You are not crossing alone," he said, his voice as clear as if he were right there beside her. "I am coming with you always." "I know," Deanna whispered. "I am ready now. Take me home." She took her last breath peacefully, a small smile on her face, and somewhere in whatever comes after, a cowboy with gray eyes and gentle hands was waiting to take her hand and lead her across one final river, this time together, just as it had always been. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through Samuel's line and beyond. The story of Lucas and Deanna became family legend, told and retold, changing slightly with each telling but always maintaining the core truth. That love can find you in the most unexpected moments, in the most unlikely places, if you are willing to accept help when you need it most. And somewhere in Utah, in a valley watered by a year-round creek, horses still run free across land that remembers the footsteps of a woman who came west alone and found not just survival, but a love that lasted lifetimes. A love that began with simple words spoken by a river. "You are not crossing alone. I am coming with you always." Those words, carved eventually into a stone marker at the entrance to the ranch, became more than just a family motto. They became a reminder that in this hard land, in these difficult times, we all need someone willing to stop their own journey to help us with ours. We all need someone who looks at the impossible obstacles we face and says, simply and sincerely, "I am coming with you." That is what Lucas gave Deanna that spring morning in 1867. Not just help crossing a river, but partnership for life. Not just safety for a moment, but love for eternity. And what Deanna gave Lucas in return was equally precious. The chance to love again, to hope again, to build something lasting in a world that had taken so much from him. Their love story was not perfect. They argued sometimes, struggled sometimes, faced obstacles that seemed insurmountable. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. They proved that sometimes the greatest adventures begin not with grand plans or careful preparation, but with a simple offer of help at exactly the right moment. And so the legend persists, passed down through generations, inspiring others to take chances on love, to trust in unexpected meetings, to believe that sometimes the person who stops to help you in your moment of greatest need might just be the person you have been searching for all your life, even if you did not know you were searching. In the end, that is what makes their story worth telling and retelling. Not because it is unique or special or different from other love stories, but because it is universal. Because we have all stood beside our own swollen rivers, wondering if we have the courage to cross. And we have all hoped that someone would appear and say those magic words. "You are not crossing alone. I am coming with you always." Lucas and Deanna proved that when someone offers you that gift, when someone extends that hand, the brave thing to do is take it, trust it. Build something beautiful with it, because that is how legends are born. That is how love survives. That is how two people become one story that echoes through time, inspiring others to stop wagons, to help strangers, to believe in the power of showing up at exactly the right moment. Their 4 children lived long, productive lives, each carrying forward the values Lucas and Deanna had instilled. Hard work, compassion, the importance of family, and above all, the willingness to help others even when it was not convenient or easy. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren spread across the West, but they always remembered their roots, always returned to the ranch where it all began, always told the story of the cowboy and the woman by the river. And if you go to that valley in Utah even today, where horses still run free and the creek still flows year-round, you can feel something in the air, something hopeful and enduring, the echo of a love that refused to be defeated by loss or hardship or the simple passage of time. The proof that sometimes the best decisions we make are the ones that seem reckless in the moment but turn out to be exactly right. Lucas stopping Deanna's wagon that spring morning was one of those decisions. A choice made in an instant that shaped the rest of two lives and created ripples that spread through generations. It was not planned. It was not calculated. It was simply one human being seeing another in need and deciding to help, even though he could have kept riding, kept his life simple, stayed alone. But he did not. He stopped. He spoke. He stayed. And in doing so, he gave Deanna not just safe passage across a river, but passage into a whole new life. A better life. A life filled with love and family and purpose. And she gave him the same gift in return. That is the real magic of their story. Not that it was fairy tale perfect, but that it was beautifully, messily human. Two broken people finding wholeness in each other. Two lost souls finding home. Two individuals becoming something greater through partnership and love. So the story ends not with death, but with continuation. With children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carrying forward the legacy. With a ranch that still operates, still trains horses, still bears the name Kincaid. With a love story that refuses to be forgotten, that insists on being told again and again, that reminds us all of our capacity for connection even in the hardest of times. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, a cowboy with gray eyes holds his wife's hand as they watch their descendants carry on the work they started. They see the ranch they built together still standing. They see their love reflected in the faces of people they will never meet, but who carry their blood and their values forward into an uncertain future. "We did all right," Lucas says, and Deanna smiles, that same smile that captured his heart by a river so many years ago. "We did better than all right," she replies. "We did exactly what we were meant to do. We found each other. We built something lasting. We loved well." "Would you do it again?" Lucas asks, though he knows the answer. "If you could go back, knowing everything that was coming, would you still let me stop your wagon that day?" Deanna does not even hesitate. "Every single time," she says. "In every life, in every version of this story, I would choose you. Always you." "You are not crossing alone," Lucas says, the words as true now as they were that first morning. "I am coming with you always," Deanna finishes, and together they turn back to watch the sunset over the land they loved, the life they built, the legacy they created through simple acts of courage and love. And that, in the end, is how legends are born. Not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, though those have their place, but through the quiet choices we make every day to show up, to help, to love, to build something lasting in a world that seems designed to tear everything down. Lucas and Deanna's story reminds us that we are all capable of being heroes in someone else's story. All we have to do is stop, pay attention, and be willing to say those magic words. "You are not crossing alone. I am coming with you always." Because sometimes those words change everything.